The pen was in my hand. The closing documents were spread across the mahogany table at the title company's office, and I was about to sign away $4 million. $4 million. Money I had earned, saved, and invested over 15 years of 70-hour weeks building my consulting firm from nothing. And right there on page 17 of the purchase agreement, in crisp black letters that blurred as my eyes filled with tears, I saw the name of the property owner, Linda Diane Crawford, my mother-in-law. Not Ashley Diane Mitchell. Not Ashley and Brandon Mitchell. Linda Diane Crawford. I looked up at my husband. Brandon wouldn't meet my eyes. He was fidgeting with his wedding ring, spinning it around his finger the way he always did when he was nervous. The realtor, a perfectly polished woman named Deborah, was smiling at me with that practiced patience agents use when they want you to just shut up and sign. And across the table, my mother-in-law sat with her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene, almost smug, like a cat who'd already swallowed the canary, and was now just waiting for someone to pour her cream. "Honey," Brandon said, his voice cracking slightly, "just sign and pay. It's just a formality. We can sort out the name thing later." But I'm not stupid. I have never been stupid. And in that moment, sitting in that leather chair with the afternoon sun streaming through the blinds, I understood with perfect crystalline clarity exactly what was happening. My husband and his mother were trying to steal $4 million from me. Let me tell you how I got to that table. Because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with love. And honestly, that's the part that still hurts the most. 7 years ago, I was 31 years old, running a management consulting firm I'd built from my studio apartment in Chicago. Mitchell and Associates. Well, it was just Mitchell back then because there were no associates. Just me, my laptop, a coffee addiction that would have concerned a cardiologist, and a stubborn refusal to fail. I grew up in Neepville, the daughter of a high school math teacher and a nurse. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. There was always this low hum of financial anxiety in our house. The kind where your parents say we'll see instead of no because they don't want you to know they can't afford it. I swore that when I grew up, I'd never feel that hum again. So I worked. God, did I work. Scholarships through Northwestern, MBA at Kellogg, 3 years at Mackenzie learning how the big boys played. And then I went out on my own because I realized I was making millions for partners who played golf while I pulled all-nighters. My specialty was restructuring mid-size companies. The unsexy, brutal work of walking into a failing business, figuring out where the bleeding was, and stopping it. I was good at it, really good. By the time I was 30, my firm was billing $2 million a year, and I had a team of 6. That's when I met Brandon Crawford at a fundraiser for the Lincoln Park Zoo. He was standing by the penguin exhibit with a glass of champagne, laughing at something his friend had said. And when he turned and our eyes met, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. My stomach flipped. Actual butterflies. I remember thinking, oh no, not now. I don't have time for this. Brandon was charming. That's the word everyone used about him, and it was accurate. He had this warm, easy smile, sandy brown hair that always looked slightly tousled, and blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. He worked in commercial real estate. Not at the top, not closing the biggest deals, but doing well enough. He drove a BMW, wore nice watches, and knew how to make you feel like you were the only person in the room. Our first date was at a tiny Italian place in Wicker Park. He held the door open, pulled out my chair, and asked me about my work with genuine curiosity. Most men, when I told them what I did, either got intimidated or competitive. Brandon just leaned forward and said, "That's incredible. You literally save companies for a living." We were engaged within a year. I met his mother, Linda, early on. She lived in a big colonial house in Lake Forest that her late husband, Gerald, had bought 30 years ago. Gerald had been in insurance, did well, left her comfortable, but not wealthy. Linda was 63, impeccably dressed with silver hair she wore in a bob, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were being appraised. Like she was mentally calculating your net worth and deciding whether you were worthy. "So you run your own business," she said the first time we met over lunch at her dining room table. The china was Wedgwood, the napkins were linen. "How ambitious of you." The way she said ambitious, it wasn't a compliment. It was a diagnosis. "Mom loves you," Brandon told me in the car afterward. "She said you were very driven." Is that what she said? "She needs time to warm up. That's just how she is." I let it go. I was in love. And when you're in love, you file away the small things, the little pricks of discomfort, because the big picture is so beautiful. You don't want anything to ruin it. We got married at the Drake Hotel, 200 guests. My parents cried. Linda wore ivory, which my maid of honor, Jennifer, said was basically white, and that woman knows exactly what she's doing. I chose not to care. The wedding was perfect. Brandon's vows made everyone cry. He promised to be my partner in everything, my equal, my rock. For a while he was. The first 3 years of our marriage were genuinely happy. We bought a townhouse in Lincoln Park. Brandon's real estate work was steady, bringing in around $150,000 a year. My firm kept growing. By year 2 of our marriage, I'd expanded to 14 employees, and we were billing close to $5 million annually. I was the primary breadwinner by a wide margin, but Brandon never seemed bothered by it. I married a powerhouse, he'd say, kissing my forehead. I'm not threatened, I'm proud. We'd cook together on Sunday nights. He made an amazing bolognese. We'd open a bottle of wine, put on old Motown records, and dance in the kitchen while the sauce simmered. Those Sunday nights were my favorite thing in the world. After a week of being the boss, the fixer, the person everyone leaned on, I could just be Ashley. Just a woman slow dancing with her husband in a warm kitchen that smelled like garlic and tomatoes. Even Linda seemed to soften. She started calling me dear instead of Ashley. She'd ask about the business, though her questions always had a slight edge. $5 million in billing, my goodness. And how much of that do you actually keep? Or you must be so tired working those hours. Brandon says he barely sees you. She's just old-fashioned, Brandon would say whenever I brought it up. She thinks the wife should be home. She'll get over it. But Linda didn't get over it. She adapted. That's what I understand now. She didn't change her opinion of me. She just got smarter about hiding it. The idea of buying a condo came up in our 4th year of marriage. My firm had hit a milestone. $8 million in annual revenue, 22 employees, and I just landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company that was going to change everything. We were outgrowing the townhouse, and I wanted something that reflected where we were headed. Something permanent, a real home. Brandon suggested we look at new developments downtown. There was a luxury building going up on Lakeshore Drive, floor-to-ceiling windows, lake views, a rooftop pool, the works. Units started at $2 million and went up from there. We toured the penthouse level, and I fell in love with Unit 42B. 3 bedrooms, 3 and 1/2 baths, 2,200 square feet of open concept, living with a view of Lake Michigan that made you feel like you were floating above the city. The price tag, $4 million. We can afford it, I told Brandon that night, spreadsheets open on my laptop. If I put down 60% from savings and investments, the mortgage on the rest is completely manageable with my income. Our income, he corrected gently. Of course, our income, he smiled. But something flickered across his face just for a second, so fast I almost missed it. Something tight, something calculating. I told myself I imagined it. Over the next 2 months, Brandon threw himself into the purchase process with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from him in years. He coordinated with the realtor. He handled the paperwork. He set up meetings with the title company. I was grateful. I was drowning in the Fortune 500 contract and barely had time to sleep, let alone manage a real estate transaction. Let me handle this, he said. You focus on work. I'll make sure everything's perfect. You're the best, I told him. That's what husbands are for. He'd bring me documents to review, but always late at night when I was exhausted. Always with a casual, just need your signature here, here, and here. I signed. I trusted him. He was my husband. He was my partner. He'd promised. Then came the closing day, a Thursday in October. I remember the weather was gorgeous. One of those perfect Chicago fall days where the sky is so blue it hurts and the leaves along Michigan Avenue look like they're on fire. I left the office early, something I never did, and drove to the title company's office on Wabash. Brandon was already there. So was Deborah, the realtor, and so to my surprise was Linda. Mom wanted to be here, Brandon said quickly before I could ask. She's excited for us. Linda smiled at me. Such a big day, dear, $4 million. What an accomplishment. Something about the way she said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But I sat down, accepted the coffee Deborah offered, and started reading through the stack of closing documents. That's when I found it. Page 17. Owner Linda Diane Crawford. I read it again and again. My vision tunneled. The sounds of the room. Deborah's small talk, the hum of the air conditioning, Linda's measured breathing, all faded into a dull roar. I looked up at Brandon. He was already looking at me, and his face told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He was scared. Honey, he said, just sign and pay. It's just a formality. And Linda leaned forward, placed her manicured hand on the table, and said sweetly, don't overthink it, dear. It's a family decision. I put the pen down. I didn't sign. But what happened next, what I discovered in the days that followed, was so much worse than a name on a piece of paper. Because this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And it had been in motion for much longer than I ever could have imagined. I sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 seconds. The pen lay on the table between my fingers and the document like a line drawn in sand. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Ashley. Linda's voice was smooth, measured the way you'd talk to a child who was making a scene in a restaurant. We discussed this. Brandon explained it to you. No one explained anything to me, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Why is your name on the deed to a property I'm paying for? Linda glanced at Brandon. It was quick, barely a flicker, but I caught it. It was a look that said, handle her. Brandon cleared his throat. Ash, babe, it's a tax strategy. Mom's accountant suggested it. If the property is in her name, we get better treatment on the look. I don't remember the exact details, but it saves us like $200,000 over 10 years. I told you about this. You never told me about this. I did last month when you were working on the Hartfield contract. You were on your laptop and I explained the whole thing. You said, sounds good. He said it with such conviction that for a split second I actually doubted myself. That's the thing about gaslighting. It's most effective when you're already exhausted, already stretched thin, already used to trusting the person doing it. Had he mentioned something? Had I half listened and nodded while reviewing spreadsheets? No. I would remember someone telling me that a $4 million property would be in my mother-in-law's name. That's not something you sounds good. Your way through. I need to speak with my husband privately, I said. Deborah, the realtor, shifted in her chair. Mrs. Mitchell, we do have a timeline. The sellers are, I need 5 minutes. I stood up and walked out of the conference room without looking back. After a moment, I heard Brandon's chair scrape against the floor as he followed me. We ended up in a narrow hallway next to a water cooler and a fern that was slowly dying in its pot. What the hell is going on? I said, keeping my voice low. Ashley, you're embarrassing me. I'm embarrassing you. Your mother's name is on my property. Our property. Brandon, the down payment is coming from my savings account, my investment portfolio, money I earned before we were even married. This is my asset, and you put your mother's name on it without telling me. He ran his hand through his hair. That tousled, boyish gesture that I used to find charming now just looked like a man stalling for time. Okay, look, he said. Maybe I should have been more upfront about it, but Mom's accountant really did suggest this. It's something about estate planning. If something happens to us, the property passes cleanly to your mother. Not to my family, not to our future children, to Linda. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. That's literally what a deed means, Brandon. Whoever's name is on it owns it. Did you think I wouldn't read the paperwork? His face changed just slightly. A tightening around the jaw, a hardness in those blue eyes. I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I'd never wanted to notice. You know what your problem is, he said quietly. You always have to control everything. You can't just trust me. You can't just trust that I'm looking out for our family. Trust you? You just tried to put a $4 million condo in your mother's name using my money. Keep your voice down. Answer the question, why is her name on the deed? He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, fine. You want to kill the deal? You want to walk away from the unit you've been obsessing over for months? Go ahead, but don't blame me when someone else buys it. He turned and walked back into the conference room. I stood in that hallway alone with the dying fern and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw sparks. I did not sign that day. I told Deborah we needed to pause the closing to review some paperwork details. And I watched Linda's serene expression crack, just barely, just a hairline fracture of irritation before she reassembled her smile and said, of course, dear. Take all the time you need. That night, Brandon and I had the worst fight of our marriage. He came home at 9 smelling like whiskey. He'd gone to a bar after the failed closing, which was something he'd started doing more often in the past year. Drinks with clients that left him glassy-eyed and defensive. You humiliated my mother, he said from the bedroom doorway. I was sitting on the bed with my laptop doing what I should have done weeks ago, reading every single document related to the condo purchase. Every email, every form, every amendment. Brandon, sit down. I need to show you something. I don't want to see your spreadsheets, Ashley. I want you to apologize to my mom. Sit down. Something in my voice made him comply. He sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, jaw tight. I pulled up every email between you and Deborah about the condo, I said, turning the laptop toward him. You've been corresponding for 3 months, and in this email from August 14th, you specifically asked her to change the ownership name from Ashley Mitchell to Linda Crawford. You wrote, and I'm quoting, my wife won't notice. She trusts me to handle the details. The color drained from his face. That's you went through my email. It's a shared account, Brandon. The one we set up for household stuff. You used our shared Gmail to coordinate this. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you deliberately, secretly changed the ownership of a $4 million property to your mother's name while telling me you were handling the paperwork. What does it actually look like? Mom said she said it would protect the asset in case your business ever got sued. If the condo's in her name, creditors can't touch it. She was trying to help us. Linda was trying to help us by secretly owning a property I paid for. That's your explanation. You don't understand how these things work? I restructure failing companies for a living, Brandon. I understand exactly how these things work. What I don't understand is why my husband is lying to me. He stood up abruptly. I can't talk to you when you're like this. You turn everything into a cross-examination. I'm gonna sleep in this guest room. He left. I sat there staring at the email on the screen, reading those words over and over. My wife won't notice. She trusts me to handle the details. The next morning, I called Jennifer, my best friend since college, my maid of honor, the one person who'd never sugarcoated anything for me. She was a family law attorney in the city, and when I told her what happened, the line went so quiet I thought the call dropped. Jen, you there? I'm here. I'm just Ashley. This is bad. I know. No, I mean legally bad. If you had signed those documents and paid, Linda would have owned that condo outright. Your $4 million would have bought her a piece of property. You'd have no legal claim to it. And in a divorce? I'm not getting divorced. Another pause, longer this time. Ash, honey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has Brandon ever talked about your finances in a way that made you uncomfortable? Has he ever asked about your accounts, your investments, your business valuation? I thought about it. Really thought about it, and the memories started surfacing like debris after a shipwreck. Brandon asking about my 401k balance last Christmas casually over eggnog. Brandon suggesting I add his name to my business checking account for emergencies. Brandon's strange interest in my client contracts, always asking which companies I was working with, how much each deal was worth. I'd taken it as supportive curiosity. A husband interested in his wife's work. Oh God, I whispered. Listen to me carefully, Jennifer said. Don't confront him again. Not yet. I want you to pull your credit report. Check for any accounts or loans you don't recognize. And I want you to call a forensic accountant. I know a good one. Her name is Rachel Torres. Tell her I sent you. Jen, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it really was just a bad idea about taxes. And Ashley, he wrote, my wife won't notice in an email. That's not a tax strategy. That's a con. I spent the next 3 days pretending everything was normal. It was the hardest performance of my life. Brandon apologized, brought me flowers, made his bolognese, said he'd been stupid, and that of course we'd put the condo in both our names. He was warm, attentive, repentant. The old Brandon, the one who'd made me feel like the only person in the room. I talked to Mom, he said over dinner. She understands. She said she's sorry if it caused confusion. If it caused confusion, I repeated. She didn't mean it the way it looked. You know, Mom, she's protective. She overthinks things, but she loves you. I smiled and ate my pasta and told him I forgave him. And the whole time my stomach was churning because that afternoon Rachel Torres, the forensic accountant, had called me back with her preliminary findings. Mrs. Mitchell, she'd said in a voice that was careful, professional, and devastating. I've only had 24 hours with what you've sent me, so this is very preliminary. But I found 3 credit cards opened in your name that you didn't authorize. Total balance as $112,000. I've also found a home equity line of credit on your townhouse, also in your name, also unauthorized, for $30,000. It was opened 14 months ago and it's been drawn down to 0. The room had tilted. I'd grabbed the edge of my desk. Where did the money go? I'm still tracing it, but the payments appear to go to an LLC called Crawford Family Holdings. I'll know more by Friday. Crawford Family Holdings, Crawford. His mother's maiden name was Crawford. His mother's name that was on the deed, the name that was supposed to own my $4 million condo. I was sitting across from my husband, watching him twirl spaghetti around his fork, listening to him hum an old Temptation song. And I understood with a sickening gut-level certainty that this man I had slow danced with in our kitchen, this man whose vows had made 200 people cry, had been systematically stealing from me. And I didn't know yet how deep it went. But Rachel Torres had promised me answers by Friday, and Friday was 2 days away. So I poured Brandon another glass of wine, and I smiled and I waited. Because my mother didn't raise a woman who panics. She raised a woman who plans. But that night after Brandon fell asleep, I lay in the dark next to him and cried so hard the pillow was soaked through. Not because of the money I could earn back. I cried because I finally understood what Linda had seen in me from the very first lunch on her Wedgwood china. She hadn't seen a daughter-in-law. She'd seen a bank account and she'd sent her son to open it. Friday was coming and I had no idea that what Rachel Torres would find would make $112,000 in credit card fraud look like pocket change. Friday came and Rachel Torres didn't call. She texted one line, "Can you come to my office?" "Don't bring anyone, don't tell anyone." I told Brandon I had a client lunch. He barely looked up from his phone. "Cool, babe, I'll be at the office." He kissed my cheek, a dry, perfunctor peck that landed closer to my ear than my mouth. And I walked out of our townhouse, knowing somehow that when I came back, nothing would be the same. Rachel's office was in a converted brownstone on Dearborn, 3rd floor, the kind of space that smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, Dominican, with sharp dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and not a single piece of jewelry except a watch. Her desk was covered in printed spreadsheets highlighted in 3 different colors. "Sit down, Ashley," she said. And the way she said my name gently, carefully, the way a doctor says it before delivering a diagnosis, made my knees go weak. I sat. "I'm going to walk you through what I found. Some of it you already know, most of it you don't, and I need you to stay with me because it's a lot." Okay. She picked up the first sheet, yellow highlights. The 3 credit cards I mentioned. Total balance $112,000. They were opened over the past 18 months using your social security number, your date of birth, and your home address. The applications were submitted online. The billing statements were set to paperless, routed to an email address you've never seen, ashleym@gmail.com. Someone created that email specifically to intercept the statements so you'd never know the cards existed. "Brandon," I said, "I can't confirm that legally, but the IP address used to create the email matches your home Wi-Fi network." She set the sheet down and picked up the next one. Pink highlights the home equity line of credit, $300,000, drawn down to zero. The funds were transferred in 6 installments to Crawford Family Holdings, the LLC I mentioned. That LLC was registered in Illinois 14 months ago. The registered agent is Linda Diane Crawford. The managing member is Brandon James Crawford. Crawford, I repeated, not Mitchell. He used his birth name, not his married name, which is interesting because on every other financial document I've seen, your joint accounts, your mortgage, his employment records, he goes by Mitchell. She let that sink in. Brandon had legally taken my last name when we married. It was his idea, actually, a grand romantic gesture that I'd found incredibly sweet at the time. I want to be a Mitchell, he'd said. I want us to be a team. But when it came time to set up a shell company to funnel my money through, he went back to Crawford. There's more, Rachel said. She picked up the third sheet, green highlights. This one was thick, multiple pages stapled together. Your business, Mitchell and Associates. You're the sole owner, correct? Yes. When's the last time you reviewed your corporate filings with the state? My stomach dropped. My business attorney handles that. Greg Walton. Have you spoken to Greg recently? Not in about 6 months, Brandon said he. I stopped. The room tilted again, that same sickening lurch I'd felt when Rachel first called me. Brandon said he'd handle the annual filings because I was too busy with the Hartfield contract. Rachel nodded slowly. Someone filed an amendment to your LLC's operating agreement 4 months ago. The amendment adds a second member to the LLC with a 49% ownership stake. Who? Linda Diane Crawford. The sound that came out of me wasn't a word. It was something between a gasp and a moan. A sound I'd never made before and hope I never make again. I bent forward in the chair, my forehead almost touching my knees, and pressed my hands against my mouth. My company, my baby, the thing I'd built from nothing in a studio apartment with a laptop and a coffee addiction. They were taking my company. Ashley, breathe. I need you to breathe. How? I managed. How did they? Greg would never. I don't think Greg knows. The amendment was filed directly with the Secretary of State's office. It has a signature that purports to be yours. I've compared it to your actual signature on other documents. It's close, but it's not a match. They forged my signature. That's what it appears to be. Yes. I sat up. The room was blurry. My eyes were wet, but I wasn't crying. It was more like my body was leaking, unable to contain the pressure building inside me. What's the total? I asked. Everything. All of it. Rachel took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. The credit cards, $112,000. The HESILIC, $300,000. The forged ownership amendment. If Linda were to assert her 49% stake in your company, which based on your last valuation is worth roughly $12 million, her share would be $5.88 million. And the condo, they wanted you to sign $4 million in your cash going directly to an asset Linda would own. She paused. We're looking at potential exposure of over $10 million, Ashley. This isn't a mother-in-law being difficult. This is organized financial fraud. I drove home in a fog. I don't remember the route I took. I don't remember parking. I remember standing in the kitchen of our townhouse, the kitchen where we danced to Motown and made bolognese, and I remember looking at the wine glass Brandon had left in the sink that morning and wanting to throw it through the window. Instead, I called Jennifer. I need a divorce attorney, I said. The best one in Chicago. I'll send you 3 names tonight. Ash, what did Rachel find? I told her all of it. When I finished, the silence on her end was so long, I checked to make sure the call was still connected. 10 million, Jennifer finally said. Ashley, this is criminal. Not just civil, criminal. Identity theft, forgery, fraud. You need to talk to a prosecutor. I know, and you need to get out of that house. I know that too. But I didn't leave that night. I couldn't, because when Brandon came home, he brought flowers, peas, my favorite, and a bottle of the boa we'd had on our first anniversary. And he stood in that kitchen with his tousled hair and his crinkled blue eyes, and he said, I've been thinking about what happened, and I owe you a real conversation. No defensiveness, no deflection, just honesty. And for one desperate, pathetic moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted him to have an explanation that would make it all make sense. I wanted to rewind to those Sunday nights with the Motown and the garlic and the slow dancing, and I wanted this all to be a terrible misunderstanding. Okay, I said talk. The thing with Mom's name on the condo, it was dumb. I know that. She got in my head about asset protection, and I should have just told you instead of trying to handle it behind your back. I was wrong, and the credit cards, his face didn't change, not even a flicker. What credit cards? He was good. God, he was good. He looked me right in the eyes with that warm, open expression. And if I hadn't been holding Rachel Torres's highlighted spreadsheets in my mind like a shield, I might have wavered. Never mind, I said. I was confused about a statement. You're right. Let's move past the condo thing. He smiled. Relief flooded his face. Yeah, I love you. We'll figure it out. I love you too, Ash. He hugged me. I stood there in his arms, my chin on his shoulder, staring at the wall behind him. And I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not even anger. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my marriage used to be. That weekend, something broke in me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I sat in my office at home on Saturday morning, staring at my computer screen, and I realized my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't type. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and was slowly tightening it. I kept checking my phone, convinced Brandon would somehow discover what I knew, that Linda would call, that it would all collapse before I was ready. By Sunday night, I hadn't slept more than 2 hours total. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Dark circles, hollow cheeks, eyes that looked like they belonged to someone who'd been in a car accident. I was falling apart. And the worst part was that I had to hide it from Brandon, from my employees, from the world. The only people who knew the truth were Jennifer and Rachel, and they were both telling me to move fast, to file, to act. But I couldn't make my body cooperate with my brain. On Monday morning, I drove to work and sat in the parking garage for 45 minutes. Just sat there with the engine off, staring at the concrete wall, breathing. My phone buzzed, a text from Brandon. "Have a great day, superstar. Dinner tonight with a heart emoji." I threw up in a Starbucks cup I'd left in the cup holder. That's when Jennifer's text came through, just a name and a phone number. "Karen Whitfield, best divorce litigator in Illinois. She's expecting your call. She knows everything. Call her now." I stared at the name. Karen Whitfield, I'd heard of her. Everyone in Chicago's professional circles had heard of her. She'd represented the wife of a tech CEO in a divorce that made national news. Walked away with a $120 million settlement and a restraining order that was still being talked about in legal circles. My thumb hovered over the number. And then I thought about those Sunday nights, the bolognese, the dancing, Brandon's vows at the Drake Hotel, my partner in everything, my equal, my rock. Then I thought about my wife won't notice. I pressed call. Karen Whitfield answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, measured, and sharp enough to cut glass. "Ashley Mitchell," Jennifer briefed me. "I have 2 questions. First, are you ready to fight? Because based on what I've heard, this will get ugly. Second, do you have somewhere safe to stay that your husband doesn't know about?" "Yes to the first," I said. "No to the second. Fix that by tonight. I want you out of that house before he has any idea what's coming. And Ashley, from this moment forward, you don't discuss finances, the condo, or the marriage with Brandon. Not a word. Everything goes through me." "Understood. Understood. Good. Now here's what we're going to do." For the next 30 minutes, Karen laid out a plan so precise, so methodical, so devastatingly thorough that I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not hope exactly. It was harder than hope, colder. It was resolve. Karen Whitfield wasn't just a lawyer. She was a general, and she was about to go to war with the Crawford family on my behalf. But she warned me, "They're going to come at you, Ashley. When people like this get cornered, people who've been running a long con, they don't surrender. They escalate. Be ready for that." I wasn't ready, not for what came next. Because that Tuesday evening when I came home to pack a bag while Brandon was supposedly at a showing, I opened the front door and found Linda sitting in my living room alone, waiting for me with a folder in her lap and a smile on her face. "Sit down, dear," she said. "We need to have a conversation about your future." I didn't move. Linda was sitting in my reading chair, the vintage wingback I'd found at an estate sale in Evanston, the one Brandon always said was ugly but I loved, and she looked completely at home. More at home than I'd ever seen her look in my house. "How did you get in?" I asked. "Brandon gave me a key years ago, dear. Surely you knew that." I didn't. Another thing filed under things Ashley didn't notice. She gestured to the couch. "Please sit." "This is my house, Linda. Is it?" She opened the folder in her lap. "Because according to the home equity line of credit, this house is leveraged to the hilt. You might own the walls, but the bank owns everything inside them." She smiled. "Sit down, Ashley." I sat, not because she told me to, but because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I sat on the couch in my own living room and watched my mother-in-law spread papers across my coffee table like she was dealing cards. "Here's what's going to happen," Linda said. "You're going to sign the condo into my name. You're going to accept the changes to your business's operating agreement. And you're going to continue being married to my son because a divorce would be expensive and embarrassing for everyone. And if you don't, I'll tell every client your firm has that you're under federal investigation for tax fraud. I have contacts, Ashley. Gerald may be dead, but his friends in insurance and banking are very much alive. One phone call from me and your precious Fortune 500 contract disappears." My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs. "You have no evidence of tax fraud because there is no tax fraud." "Evidence?" Linda waved her hand dismissively. "People don't need evidence, dear. They need doubt. One whisper, one rumor, and your clients start asking questions. How long does a consulting firm survive when its clients don't trust it?" She leaned back in my chair and crossed her ankles. "Cream-colored pumps. Probably $400. I raised my son to marry well," she said, and there was no pretense now. No sweetness, no dear. Her voice was cold and flat as a frozen lake. "Gerald left me comfortable, but comfortable isn't enough. Not for the life I deserve. You were the plan, Ashley. You were always the plan." I stared at her. This woman who'd sat at the Drake Hotel in her ivory dress, who'd called me driven like it was a disease, who'd smiled at me over Wedgwood, China, while calculating exactly how much I was worth. "Get out of my house," I said. "Think about what I've said. Get out now." She gathered her folder, smoothed her skirt. At the door, she turned back. You're smart, Ashley. Everyone says so. But smart women make stupid mistakes when they're emotional. Don't be emotional. The door closed behind her. I sat on the couch for 10 minutes without moving. Then I picked up my phone and called Karen Whitfield. She was in my house. I said she threatened me. She laid out the entire scheme and she wasn't even ashamed of it. Did you record it? I looked down at my phone. The voice memo app was still running. I'd opened it the second I saw Linda sitting in that chair. Instinct, reflex. The same instinct that had made me read page 17 of the closing documents. Every word, I said. Karen Whitfield laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh. It was short, sharp, and triumphant. Ashley Mitchell, you beautiful genius. Email that to me right now and pack your bag. You're staying at Jennifer's tonight. The next 6 weeks were the most intense of my life. More intense than building my company. More intense than the Hartfield contract. Karen filed for divorce on a Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon, Brandon had called me 47 times. I didn't answer. Everything goes through me, Karen had said. So everything went through her. Karen also filed an emergency motion to freeze all joint assets and separate motion for a restraining order against Linda based on the recording. She contacted the Cook County State's Attorney's Office about the identity theft, the forged signature on my LLC amendment, and the fraudulent credit cards. Rachel Torres provided all documentation. Brandon's response was predictable. He hired a lawyer, a mid-tier guy named David Prescott, who was clearly out of his depth against Karen Whitfield. His opening move was to claim that I had abandoned the marital home, that I was emotionally unstable, and that the changes to the LLC were made with my verbal consent. Karen dismantled each claim in a single filing. The recording of Linda in my living room, in which she explicitly described the scheme, threatened me and said, "You were always the plan," was attached as Exhibit A. David Prescott requested a continuance. Karen denied it. The judge sided with Karen. The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected. The Cook County prosecutor assigned to the case, a woman named Diane Okafor, was aggressive and thorough. The forged signature on the LLC amendment was sent to a handwriting expert who confirmed it wasn't mine. The IP records from fraudulent credit card applications were subpoenaed. Everything traced back to the home Wi-Fi network and, more specifically, to a laptop registered to Brandon J. Crawford. Brandon was arrested on a Wednesday morning. Jennifer texted me a link to the story on the local news. I watched the footage. My husband in handcuffs, being led out of the townhouse I'd bought, past the neighbors who'd waved at us every morning. He was wearing the blue button-down I'd given him for his birthday. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindication. I felt like I was watching a building I'd lived in get demolished. You know it has to come down. You know it's structurally unsound. But you still remember what it felt like to live there when you thought it was safe. Linda was arrested 3 days later. The charges were conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Her bail was set at $200,000. She posted it within hours. Turns out the Crawford Family Holdings LLC still had some of my money left. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I filed. Karen Whitfield earned every penny of her fee. The townhouse was awarded to me. The fraudulent HELOC was voided. The forged LLC amendment was reversed. My company was mine again, solely, completely. The 3 credit cards were closed and the balances discharged as fraudulent debt. Brandon got nothing. Not because I was vindictive, but because under Illinois law, assets acquired before the marriage and through individual effort remained separate property. My firm, my savings, my investments, they were mine before Brandon and they were mine after him. Brandon pleaded guilty to 2 counts of identity theft and 1 count of fraud. His sentence, 3 years in state prison plus restitution. Linda went to trial because of course she did. She sat in the courtroom in a cream-colored blazer, silver bob, perfectly styled, and told the jury that she was a grieving widow who'd been manipulated by her own son. The jury didn't buy it. The recording killed her defense. You were always the plan played in that courtroom. And I watched 12 strangers' faces harden as they listened to a mother describe using her son as a tool to rob his wife. Linda was convicted on all counts. She got 5 years. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into a cold Chicago afternoon. Jennifer was waiting on the steps. She didn't say anything. She just handed me a coffee and stood next to me while I breathed. "How do you feel?" she finally asked. "Empty," I said. "Like I won, but I lost, too. You didn't lose, Ash. You survived." I sold the townhouse. I couldn't live there anymore. Every room was a memory I didn't want. I bought a condo eventually. Not the penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, a smaller place in the West Loop. 2 bedrooms, lots of light. I picked it myself. I read every page of the paperwork. The deed has 1 name on it. Ashley Diane Mitchell, my company recovered. The Fortune 500 contract held. It turned out my clients cared about results, not rumors. And Linda never got the chance to make those phone calls. Revenue hit $15 million the year after the divorce. I promoted my 2 best consultants to partner and renamed the firm Mitchell & Partners. Real partners this time, people who earned it. I go to therapy every Thursday at 4. I'm learning to trust again, which turns out to be much harder than building a company or surviving a con. Some days I'm fine. Some days I hear a Motown song in a coffee shop and I have to leave because my chest gets tight and my eyes burn and I'm back in that kitchen, dancing with a man who was counting my money while I counted my blessings. My parents come to visit every month. My mom always brings homemade banana bread, and my dad always fixes something in my condo that isn't broken because that's how he shows love. Last Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner for the first time. Just my parents, Jennifer and her husband, Rachel Torres, who's become a friend, and Karen Whitfield, who brought a bottle of wine that costs more than my first month's rent in that studio apartment where it all began. We went around the table saying what we were thankful for. When it was my turn, I said, "Page 17, everyone laughed. But I meant it because page 17 saved my life. One moment of paying attention. One refusal to just sign and pay. That's all that stood between me and losing everything. Brandon writes me letters from prison sometimes. I don't open them. Jennifer says he's filed an appeal. Karen says it won't go anywhere. I don't really care either way. He's not my husband anymore. He's not even a person I think about most days. He's just a lesson I learned at the cost of 7 years and a broken heart. Linda, from what I hear, has not adjusted well to prison. Apparently, the Wedgwood china and linen napkins are in short supply. I'd feel sorry for her, but then I remember her sitting in my chair in my house telling me I was the plan, and the sympathy evaporates like steam. People ask me sometimes on podcasts, at speaking events, over drinks, whether I saw the signs, whether I could have caught it sooner, and the honest answer is yes. The signs were there from the beginning. Linda's appraising eyes, Brandon's too smooth charm, the way he always wanted to handle things, the way she always said dear like it was a leash, but I was in love. And love makes you file away the small things, the little pricks of discomfort. Because the big picture is so beautiful, you don't want anything to ruin it. Until the day the big picture cracks and you realize the small things were the only things that were real. I'm 38 now. My company is thriving. My credit score is 820. My condo is mine. My life is mine. And I will never ever hand someone a pen and say just sign because I know what's on page